Hello and welcome. My name is Leah Kopke. I'm a 3D motion design freelancer, and this is my 3D modeling podcast, Ambient 3D Animations. Today I'm super pumped up about this episode because I had a ton of fun making these rings, and I'm excited to share my process with all of you. I created these rings using Rocket Lasso's Gemstone collection. Chris Schmidt was kind enough to gift this to me along with some other plugins. He didn't ask me to make a YouTube video about it. He didn't ask me to promote it. I'm just sharing my personal experience using it, and I thought it was a ton of fun. I really enjoyed it. I'll leave a link to the shop below. So on Rocket Lasso's store, you can check out the Rocket Lasso Gemstone collection. This is what I had used. And it frees up a lot of time as a motion designer. You don't need to worry about figuring out the perfect angles to create those cuts on the gems or look up different kinds of gem cuts or any of that, because this pack pretty much comes with that. And you could see all of these different examples of what you can create using this gem pack. I'd like to just quickly show Rocket Lasso's Gemstone collection, the Redshift file. There's also just a file with these gem shapes, so you can use them with other renderers. But it also comes with one that's specifically for Redshift. So if you're interested in Redshift, this is the one to check out. And you'll see this file comes with all of these different types of pre-made materials. We have diamond, topaz, garnet. I can go ahead and start the IPR and you'll see a nice little preview here. And it's starting to render, and you can see how much variety there is in different shapes and colors, and you can apply different colors to these. One that's really cool is the Gem Maker. If you check out the Gem Maker over here and open it, you'll see that there's all of these nodes, and at first glance it looks pretty complicated, but I promise you that all this complexity actually makes your life a whole lot easier, because these are all set up so that you actually have these settings down here that you can enter to control these. So I'm actually going to delete all the materials off of here. And I'm just going to add the Gem Maker to these. I'll go ahead and hit Start IPR. So you can see that right now the Gem Maker is set to this blue color. I'm going to right click on this image and change it to be a gem shape in the preview, just because I feel like that's a little bit more fitting. And you can adjust the color in here. I could make this pink or something like that. And you'll see that it updates. I can adjust the color further. This is pretty. And then there's these other options down here like hue variation, and you can bump this up pretty far. And you'll see that there's other colors coming into these gems, and isn't that beautiful? That's just gorgeous. And how easy that was. See, that's what I was talking about with those nodes that look really complicated, but they allow you to do hard things in a simple way. Like this would be a lot of work to set up manually, and that work's already done for you, and you have these sliders all set up so it's easy to add these in. So this looks beautiful. We can add some value variation in here too. You can adjust the cloudiness. So that's kind of cool. Maybe you're working on a gem that's a little bit more cloudy looking. You could also adjust the blur. So that's pretty. There's imperfections you can add into these, which is fun. You can adjust the bump. I wonder if we'll see that a little bit more with the cloudiness added in. But the main point is that you can make all different kinds of gems with these. You can adjust the noise scale too. And I'd suggest, if you are really interested in this, I'll also leave a link to the video where Chris Schmidt is explaining all of these, because Rocket Lasso had worked on this and they're experts in what they create. So I'll go ahead and leave that for you here. To start it off with, what I had initially done is I just started looking up jewelry online and looking at online stores showing rings and things like that, becoming familiar with different types of settings and gemstones before 3D modeling something. And even as I initiated this and I started 3D modeling, I didn't really have a specific plan in mind other than I'm going to make a ring and be a little bit experimental. I didn't have a specific design for that ring in mind. I started off with looking up ring size 6 because that's a pretty common one. And I created a circular spline that size so that I could use the spline wrap. So we talked about that last episode, actually, the spline wrap. And I used a cube, and I made the cube the length of the circumference of the circle so that I could make a cutout in it, use the loop cut tool to add in some loops. And I actually tried cloning a gemstone so I get an idea of what should the spacing of these loops be, because I wanted to make a setting for each one of those gemstones so that they could hold it. And so I went through that, adding in all those cuts. And then I tried using the spline wrap to put around the spline. And from there, I made further adjustments. I added in more cuts. The first cloner I used mainly for measuring purposes, for setting up the loop cuts for 3D modeling the ring. And then later on, I set up another cloner, but this one was to actually add the gemstones into the ring. So for that one, I used the radial option for the cloner so that I could get that nice and perfect ring shape with all the gemstones around there and save me some time. No one wants to place each gemstone individually. The process felt like I was going back and forth between the spline wrap and just adding cuts onto the cube, going back and forth between those two until they looked just right. And I added more instances of the gem. I thought it would be cool to have more than one shape of gem just to add more interest to the ring. So I did grab a couple different shapes and I put them both underneath the cloner so then that way they would alternate. And I thought it would be fun to have different colors. I did try a couple different ones before I landed on using emerald and ruby. I really like how those are complementary colors, so that was the direction I ended up going by the end. But I did try out some other ones like sapphire, and that was a ton of fun to try out that. So I had gone ahead and selected the points around the ring, and I used the soft selection so that I could get some nice curves as I had actually moved those points in. And then I started extruding out areas using the radial symmetry so that I could make sure that the clasps, I think that they're called prongs, the prongs around each gem holding it in place, that those would be symmetrical all the way around, and then I'd only have to do it for one part of the ring and it would automatically happen to every single part while using the radial symmetry. So I went ahead and did that. It was a lot of smoothing areas out using the iron tool inside of Cinema 4D. I also added more loops in with the loop selection. I used the thicken generator in order to add some thickness to the ring so that that metal around each gem looks a little bit more realistic and it has that thickness. Here you can see that I was using the lighting to try seeing what does this metal look like and adding in that platinum color. I made sure that everything looked accurate for the material. And this was actually the part where you can see that I was trying out different colors for the gemstones. And it was a really fun process. I think at this point I was looking at the edges as well, and they seemed a little bit too straight to me. So I really like that scalloped look that I saw in jewelry. So you can see that I started pulling in those areas using the soft selection again. You'll notice that these edges are also beveled, so I used the bevel deformer in order to add in that little bevel going around the parts that were platinum. I had gone ahead and made a duplicate of that first gemstone part and then added in a center because I thought it would be cool if I added in some inlaid cherry in the center of it. So you could see that that's kind of what I'm figuring out here. And then as I was thinking about it, I felt like something was missing, so I added a big gem on top of it. I switched it from that diamond material to the ruby again so that it would go with the other little small gems going around it. And then here I started creating the basket setting in order to hold the gem. And I just started extruding out from that original mesh I made. And that mesh that you saw that I put in there for the center part, I just grabbed that from an older version of the saved file in order to add in here for the center part. So that was the original cube before I added in those nice scalloped edges and such. You can also see here that I added in a bulge deformer, and I started trying to use that to 3D model the basket setting instead of just relying on doing that by hand, because I thought I could use the bulge deformer later in order to animate it, holding the gem, because then I could make it open and close. I used the bridge tool in order to connect those edges, soft selection to make those nice arches on the basket setting, and you can kind of see me doing that here. When I worked on this, I had to do a lot of fixing the geometry and just making sure that it was clean enough of geometry to thicken and add bevels on it, which is hard for something thin like jewelry to really get it to have those angles that works well with that. The nice thing about using a bevel deformer and the thicken generator is that those are procedural. So as I was working on this, I could try things out and see if it worked on the cage, the original mesh, and then seeing if that translated over to the final mesh that I would like to have with the bevels and the thicken added to it. You can see at some points it looks a little spiky, and that's from those crazy polygons not being able to bevel a certain area or not having it thicken quite right in another area. So once I got those all working, I could see that in the final mesh when everything laid nice and smooth. And I found that adding some more thickness around that top part in the basket was really helpful. I wanted to create that inlaid cherry part, so I actually took a photo of my flooring because I have cherry flooring, and I had photoshopped off all the dust and scratches from it, and I used that in order to create the texture. I really only needed a color map because I want this to look super shiny, like if someone coated it with polyurethane and then sanded it up to 2000 grit sandpaper. And if you are a fellow woodworker, you know that 2000 grit sandpaper is really nice, fine sandpaper that's going to look nice and glossy like a glass table. That's how smooth it's going to be. So I was working on that. I made sure that the cherry texture was seamless by mirroring it both horizontally and vertically so that it would be nice and the grains would match up. It kind of reminds me of, if you're a woodworker, when you have book matched wood panels so that they look like they are symmetrical, but they really aren't. It's just you cut the board down the middle and opened it up so that it'll look symmetrical. It's kind of a similar way of that, except with your textures. And if you're unfamiliar with woodworking, you can look that up and know what I'm talking about when I say book matched grain. At this point, you can see that I am fixing an area. I accidentally welded some points together that I didn't mean to, so I was fixing that with the bridge tool and the weld. And from there, I was trying out some lighting. I felt super inspired by actually a story that my friend had told me. She told me that she had welded her ring together because she didn't like them sliding around. So she had multiple rings that she had the jeweler weld together. And I felt really inspired by that. So as I was animating this, I decided to have the ring come together, kind of symbolizing that idea of you can weld multiple rings together to make one, and how that's a really cool concept to me. And I also animated the gem coming into the ring with the bulge deformer that we talked about earlier. I tried out multiple different kinds of lighting. You can see I have this dark, moody version that I did, and I also did this light, kind of more eerie, optimistic feeling lighting. I like both of them. So huge thanks to Chris Schmidt for gifting me this gemstone pack. It's been super fun working with it, and I'd highly recommend it. You get to see a little bit of what I had created with it personally. It'd be fun to see what other people create with it too, if you do make something. And I also want to give a huge thanks to my subscribers and those who maybe even joined in here the first time to watch. Thank you for staying here and listening to me talk. It's so much more fun creating with a community than by myself. And I'd also like to say, if you did enjoy this, please give it a thumbs up. If you would like to see more videos like this or learn about the tools that I used to work on this, you can hit subscribe or check out the other videos on my podcast. I go through a lot of the 3D modeling tools I used to actually create this ring in greater depth in those videos. And I hope to see you here next time on Ambient 3D Animations.